For the first exercise, I will show you how we can create this garden chair, which is made out of the remains of a wood pallet. And this will give you a good introduction into the proper workflow or best practice in how we could approach this design. For example, we will start with creating all the individual building blocks, creating dimensions, etc. for them. And then we will start clicking them together, so we kind of like build a somewhat assembly. Then we can refine the design a little bit, for example, work on proportions, etc. And then at the end, we will finish the design by adding design features, for example, like the wood joinery, chamfered or rounded edges, etc. So let's get started with a new scene. Make sure under the scene we can set in units the length to imperial, because all our lumber we have is actually dimensioned in inches. So this will make it a lot easier. Then press 7 to go into your top view and make sure you're in orthographic view. Just as a reminder, 5 on the keypad switches between orthographic and perspective. Then we can zoom in a little bit till we see inches. Good. Now we can start with a plane. So Shift A and then go to Mesh and we add a plane. We can go to Transform and then there we see that by default the plane is 2 feet by 2 feet. What I need, for example, for X is 3.25 inches. Because the unit system is set to imperial and a foot is the base unit, currently if I would hit enter, it would read out as 3.25 feet. That's not really what I want. I want 3.25 inches, so don't forget to add the correct unit system. I think we can also even type in IN for inches. For Y, this is 1.5 inches. Okay, good. Now we can rotate the view a little bit, and you see, maybe in my case, I have to center the view. So you can either press the period on the numpad, or inside the view menu, we can go to view selected numpad. There. Okay, good. Now we have to extrude out of this surface a solid. And one of the main reasons why, for example, I start not with a cube, which is already a solid or a volume, but with a plane is, as you can see, the object center point, so this XYZ, is actually right at the center and flush with the plane. So it is centered at the later the bottom face. And you will see why this will be very useful. So now we have to extrude it out. We have to get into edit mode, either by pressing tab or select the menu, go to edit mode. By default, everything should be selected. If maybe you clicked something, press A to deselect, press A to select everything. And then to extrude it out, we can press E, and you see instantly out of a face it extrudes a solid along the Z-axis, because I created the object along X and Y because I was in top view. We can extrude it out a little bit, press left mouse button, click, and then we're good. And we can leave the object mode. So now we have a small cube. But it's not really the right height. So along the Z-axis, I need to adjust this. So we can go to transform dimension Z and then say this should be 18 inches. Can zoom out a little bit. Perfect. Okay, so this is pretty good already. 2 things we should do. First, go to properties, select object, and then here we give this a good name. So let's say this is front leg. It's really very good practice to give names to your objects. So later it will be a lot easier for when working with the modifiers, or you have to search for an object and you don't have to deal with body 1, body 2 or cube. You can just find the names directly. The second thing we have to do now is, because we adjusted the dimensions, you see that the initial object we created now has actually a scale factor. So you see along X and Y and Z, there is a scale factor set. And specifically for industrial design, when we later will add edge roundings, etc., those features or modifiers will work with the scale factor. So when for example, we would say round all these edges by maybe 4 millimeters, it wouldn't be really 4 millimeters because it would use the scale factor. So it will be not exactly the same. So we have to apply the scale and reset this all to 0. So don't go ahead and type 1 in here, because then we have our original plane with the extrusion. What we want is keep the proportion and say this is now the original object and set the scale to 1. To do this, go to Object, Apply, and then Scale. Or you can use the Control A hotkey. Perfect. You see now this is all set to 1 and the dimensions are all the same. Good. So let's now create the horizontal bar. What's going to be very useful is try to work mainly in orthographic views. So I pressed 1 to go into a side view, because when you work in orthographic, you only deal with 2 axes. When, however, you're in a perspective or still orthographic 3-dimensional view, you deal, as you can see, with 3 axes at the same time. And specifically at the beginning, when you're new to CAD, it is a lot easier just to work in orthographic side view, front view, top view. So we would like to make a copy of this object. So we can press Shift D to make a copy, or for example, also here is the command duplicate object. And then when you press Shift D or select the command, instantly we made a copy and you see you're inside the move mode. Position it somewhere, doesn't matter where, left mouse button click, and then the object will be placed. Now I would like to rotate it, so I can press now R and pay attention to the rotation value. So I wanted to rotate this way, so this is 90 degrees. So I type in 90, press enter. Perfect. Okay. So this whole object, for example, is 45 inches long. And you see now Z 1.5 feet, but the Z actually doesn't feel like that distance. This is actually X, feels more like the Z here. So what's going on? Well, this is actually along X currently the object's local Z axis, but the 3D widget right now is set to global. So pay attention to when I switch this from global to local. Now you see the Z is actually rotated, and now actually the values you see here make sense. Okay, so there, 45 inches. Can zoom out a little bit. And now I would like to position this upper corner to this upper corner, because we will later add a solid joinery. We have to start building this assembly with the lumber parts at the moment intersecting each other. So make sure you have your snapping turned to vertex. You don't have to turn this one on. I never really used this one. So now you can press the X arrow and then move your mouse to where you would like to snap to, and then press Control. And when your mouse gets close to an object vertex, you see it will snap to it. There. And then while holding the Control key, release the left mouse button, and then you can release Control. Let's do this one more time. Now I will move it along the z-axis, so left mouse button, click drag, then I will hold and press Control, then I will release the left mouse button, and then I can release Control. Perfect. Now if somebody wants to rather work in like an orthographic or perspective mode, this works even here as well. So first I move this one up. Let's say this got moved by accident, so also here I make sure this is lined up correctly, and then I can bring this one over. So you see, it works kind of like in SketchUp. Okay, let's go back to the side view. Also here, let's say this is actually our back leg. There, okay. And also here, because we adjusted Z, there's a scale function. So for the moment, I would like this to be updated. There, scale, perfect, good. Now let's work on the part for the backrest. We can select this one, Shift D, move it maybe, press Escape. So we just keep it where it is. Now, for example, we can move it up a little bit to there, where you see the snapping is not really snapping the way I want, because the software predicts that I want this one snap to there. So what I will do is move this one up so it's above, and then I move it down, left mouse button, click, hold and drag, and then press and hold Control there, and then release left mouse button and release the Control key. And we are good. So this one now we will call backrest. There. And the height for this one is 25 inches. Okay. Then we will apply only the scale. And this has a small rotation, so we can press R and maybe 15 degrees. Okay, and we are in local mode, and you see now when I click on the arrow, this moves down. It's not really what I want. So in this case now, I could go back to global and move it over, and then go back to local. That's not really what I want. It's too much switching forward and backwards. So instead of using the 3D widget to do the transformation, I will simply press G, so for move, and then I can press X to restrict it only on the global X-axis. By the way, when I press X again, you see now I can slide it along the object's local axis. Again, this local axis is rotated 15 degrees. If I press X again, there's nothing, so no axis restriction. X again, global, X again, local. Okay, so we can put it maybe to a little bit somewhere there. Doesn't matter how precise this is right now. And when we zoom in a little bit, you see that this is not really very fortunate. This little part sticks out. So if we move this one in, we could maybe build the joinery later this way, or we just stick it out a little bit more, and then later we just have to cut the lower part out. Okay, but this is like detailed stuff we can tackle later. At the moment we only start to block out the basic proportions. So judging, here's your hip, legs and backrest. Maybe like this, that looks good. Okay, also never forget to call your best friend on a regular basis, save, because if you forget it and the software crashes, that's highly annoying. So let's Control S, save it. What we have now is basically one side of the lumber construction for the chair, and now we need the other side. So one logical thought would be select everything, Shift D, make a copy, and then move it along the Y-axis to the other side, which is okay. That's valid. But The clue in trying to work smart in CAD is trying to automate as many steps as possible. So when you do an adjustment, let's say on the left side, the right side will update instantly as well. And what I will introduce you to now is the mirror modifier. So for example, all those we can with the left mouse button and shift select. So again, left mouse button, click one, hold the shift key, left mouse button, left mouse button. Okay. And then along the y-axis, we can move them over maybe, let's say 1 foot. So I press 1, press enter, and then I can release the mouse button. Other way would also be G, Y, 1, enter. Okay. So the next step is actually very important. You see my 3D cursor here is at the world center in case it is somewhere else. Two ways how we can fix this. Go to 3D cursor, left mouse button, click into a field and then drag down. So we can select all those 3 fields at once and type in 0. Or Shift S, cursor to center. Because again, wherever the cursor is, that is where we will enter an object. Now we will we will add an empty. The empty, think about it as a reference point. It doesn't render. We can't really model with it. It's just really just a 3-dimensional marker in space. If you come from a CAD application, think about it like as a construction plane. So Shift A, then we go to empty. We can, for example, select this plane axis. Perfect. Let's give this a name. So we call this one mirror axis because that is what we will use it for. We do not want to change the scale. We also do not want to rotate it, and we do not want to move the position by accident. Very important that we freeze it, because when we now start to mirror all our 3 lumber parts by using the empty, and if we adjust the empty, then obviously the mirror targets or the new mirror positions will change. And to prevent this, we lock all this. Perfect. Now, let's go to this lag part. Then we go to the properties. We select modifiers, and then we click add modifier and select mirror there. So we have an apply and a copy. Apply basically means the feature will be baked. So we will, instead of having then a mirror object and the original, we will have 2 objects. Copy just makes a copy of the mirror. Here we have 3 different axes to mirror along X, Y, or Z. In this program, we can actually mirror along multiples. So you see, for example, there, I'm just mirroring along the Z-axis, and the mirror functions across the object center, which is why for X and Y you don't see anything, because the mirrored objects are where the object is. So how do we now make use of this empty? Well, here is the mirror object. So instead of using the object center to mirror across, we can tell the program, well, use this empty, or for example, a construction plane in Fusion. 2 ways how we can select the empty. This is a field we can click into, and then there is a list of all the objects. And we can go with the mouse and click on it. We can also, let's say we have 40 objects, type in XC, and then already see it filters it out. Okay, we press enter, it selects it, and there you see now along the y-axis using this empty, there is the mirror object. We can remove, for example, an object by pressing on the X, or we can also use the eyedropper and then eyedrop this object there. Again, if we can turn this on and off. Here are also some buttons So for example, this one means now we can see this mirror result, but when we do digital rendering, so we make an image, the rendering process will ignore the mirror. This one actually, for example, hides the mirror, but it is actually visible in rendering. Okay, and then this is later moving the features up and down, and this, for example, removes a modifier. Okay, so let's go back. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, good. Now let's go to here. Then we can do exactly the same. Ding, ding, check, boom. Okay. But let me show you something different, because currently we only have 3 objects, but let's say you have 20 objects. You really don't want to do that for 19 objects. So the sequence now is really important. So we can select this one with the mouse, shift select this one, and then shift select your target or your active object, which has the mirror function we would like to copy to the previously selected. Again, these two, I would like to copy the function from this 1, 2. So this always has to be the last selected object. So number 1, number 2, last one. And then we can go to Object, Make Links. And then here we have the ability to say, well, make a link to the modifiers that are on the front leg. Or we can press Ctrl L. And there you see now they both have exactly the same modifier copied over from this one. Let's now create the small wood parts we're actually sitting on. So we can start with a plane again, Shift A, and then plane. Again, make sure that your 3D cursor is at the center. In case the object was created somewhere else, also not a big deal, 0, 0, 0. Okay, good. So this one has, for example, also a small thickness we need to add first. E and then somewhere along Z, click, doesn't matter how much, because now we will adjust everything. Along X, it will be 3.5 inches. And then along Y, so that is the width of my chair, that should be 25 inches. Whoops. There. And then the height is 0.5 inch. Okay, good. Now in this view, we can move this one way above, and then we can slide it down, hold the Control key, snap the bottom to the top, and then release the left mouse button and release the Control key. Perfect. So this is actually now our correct distance. So let's say this is wood plank. And we can now use this one as a snap target for our side parts. So you see, we work a little bit different in Blender than, for example, in Fusion. Fusion is more parametric. We can and we have to dimension everything. Blender, similar to Alias or Rhino, they're more considered free-form modelers. So we have some sort of dimensions we can work with, but then we work more with snap targets to position objects. The advantage of Fusion is everything is perfectly constrained, but that's also the disadvantage that sometimes it can be restrictive. And currently we are in the creative explorative phase, so you want to quickly explore and develop ideas, and thus we use a process which is maybe not as rigid or precise, but more fluid. And then later we bring this all over to Fusion. So we can bring this a little bit inwards and then move this, hold the Control key and snap to this corner point. Perfect. Okay, great. this one is actually not positioned correctly, so move it back. And then let's make sure this corner snaps to this corner. Okay. So I will show you now the next modifier, because we would like to make multiple copies of these wood planks and then evenly space them out. So instead of Shift D and X, Shift D and X, this is crazy. We don't do this. We will create a linear array. So select the object, go to modifier and select array. And then instantly you see something happened. So if we turn this off, you see there's a new copy. So we have, for example, a fit length or curve or count. So let's work with count. It's 3 or 4 parts. Okay, interesting. And then here we have something called relative offset. See, if we turn this off, then nothing happens. But no, if, for example, we type in a 1 after the dot, you see this. If we type in a 2, you see the gap is getting bigger. So what's happening here? Well, if we say 1, you see that basically the width along the x-axis is equal 4 times the width of a single plank. So 1 means take one plank and move it to the next one. If we say, for example, 2, you see you always have a gap of the width of a plank. If we say 1.5, now we have half the width of a plank. So maybe 1.2. Yeah, this feels good. So I tried to match this distance and this distance. Okay. Then we can go to side view. Maybe in this case, no, not Shift D, and I will soon tell you why. Oh, by the way, I also forgot this one here. This is all not adjusted yet, so let's go and fix this. Good. For the array, it didn't really matter. So I will introduce you now to making a copy via Shift D or making a clone. And when you go to Object, it says here Shift D, make a duplicate, or Alt D, make a linked duplicate or clone. This is actually also similar to what a component is in Fusion or in parametric programs. So Alt D, and we move this to somewhere else. Okay, so what's the whole deal between making a linked copy? So it's called a clone because if I go into edit mode and I adjust this, you see the other clone got adjusted as well. So here we could say this is maybe a wood plank backrest. But you see here, this object has a different name, and it's the same name for both objects. So again, 2 different objects, so containers, but they use exactly the same mesh data. So for example, here we could simply say, well, this mesh data is called wood plank. Okay, good. So I want to go into edit mode and let's see if I can undo the steps. No, I cannot. Okay, let's snap down G and Z. Now we press the equal sign. So we go into an expression and then I can type in 0.5 inches and enter. Okay, maybe this was too quick. Let's do this again. So because I adjusted the height and I can't undo it anymore, and I don't really want to have to reset the scale. You see in edit mode, when I do this, the scale doesn't adjust. And when I have 2 clones, I cannot simply bake the scale for an object, because that would mean that the mesh will be changed, but they share the same mesh data. So one easy way, simply delete with X the stuff, press A to select everything, E, you see it goes up, and then we press the equal sign, so you go into expression mode, and then 0.5 inches, actually in our case minus, so it goes up, okay, and there. But there's one problem left. And it's good to introduce you to this now as well. You might actually see that these objects are now a little bit bluish, and the other stuff is rather grayish. So what happened here was, by accident I extruded down, but I didn't really like the direction, so I extruded up. And in my case, everything is now inverted. So when you see something that's blue, that means you see the inside surface of an object. So easy fix in this case, AA. So we select everything, and then we can go to mesh, then we can go to normals and say recalculate outside, and then everything will be good again. Leave the edit mode, and you see now this color changed as well. If you want to know a little bit more about, again, what this normal means, let's go back into edit mode, go to transform, into mesh display. There is, for example, here normals. Let's click on this one, and size maybe 1 inch, okay, and let's zoom in a little bit. I press Z to switch to wireframe or go to wireframe. And there you can see that from this face there is a blue line emerging to the outside. So this normal facing to the outside tells you, you see there right now, the outside face. Now we'll select just this face, go to normal and say flip. And now you see the top one is bluish a little bit, and the others are gray. And if we go to side view, you can see that the normal now faces to the inside. So this surface is flipped. In Fusion, for example, everything that is golden is the inside surface, and everything that's silver is the outside. So they all use the same. So here again, recalculate outside. Good. Perfect. Okay. Now we have to rotate this one. So again, being in a side view, orthographic really helps. Now this is rotated 15 degrees to the right, and we could rotate this one this way, but that's not really what I want. I want actually my array from, oops, I hit this by accident. I want my array from here to grow down. So what I have to do in this case is, for example, this has to be 105. So why 105? Well, this is horizontal, and then 90 degrees, and then plus 15 is 105. Okay. Now, thankfully, again, we are in local space, so I can easily move it close to it, hold the control key and snap. Then I can press on the X arrow, hold the control key and snap to the top one. Perfect. So let's see if we can sneak in an extra element. Perfect. Fits. Good. Let's maybe adjust this here a little bit. GXX. Again, GX means move along the X-axis, global. And then the second time I press X, move the object along the local G-axis. So now I can move it down a little bit. So I try to eyeball that this distance is a little bit equal to there. Okay, that's maybe a little bit too big. Too small. So I select everything. So this one, and then G and X only global, move it over, and then here G, X, X, and move it a little bit back. So now this distance is equal this distance. Okay, that will look a little bit more refined. Perfect. Good. Now this one is a tick too high. You see here, this is now Z, so we have to press G, Z, Z. And we can move it and slide it along the Z-axis, Control, hold it, snap, click, left mouse button, release, Control. Done. Okay. Last one that's left is the front part. So again, Alt D, move it to somewhere else. R19. Oh, sorry, 90. Enter. Then G, move it down. And then we can slide it against it, slide it up. And it's up to, you know, do we keep this gap there or do we try to do something that gives you a similar feeling for this gap? I might actually, in this case, simply settle for GZ. I can do this vertical and just make it flush. Okay, this looks a little bit better. Perfect. So now we have actually most of our proportional parts ready. Never forget, again, call your friend. They like you when you call them. Control S, or on the Mac also Command S. So what would be the next logical step? Well, maybe let me introduce you to the layer system at this point. Currently, we have this kind of interesting old system with 20 layers. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 20, something. If you click on one icon, you switch actually to the layer. You can show multiple layers by holding the Shift key and the left mouse button. Click onto those. And we will use those now to spread our elements out a little bit. First, this one maybe I should call wood plank front. How did I call this one? Backrest. Okay, good. So maybe all those. So I have 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I will move those to layer 4. To move them to layer 4, you can select those objects and then go move to layer. And then simply click on the layer or press 4. And then they're gone. So you see now this layer is not selected, so it's not visible. Shift, left mouse button click, and we can see it. Okay. Now this one, M and 2. M is a shortcut. This one, M and 3, another shortcut. This one is the mirror axis. Well, we can keep it where it is. Or we can maybe M and move it a layer below. I very often work with the top layers as the objects I work with, and then the layers below are then layers where I put objects in that I use for certain functions. So let me show you now how we can make use of the Boolean modifier and clones to create the different joinery. But before we continue, let's actually turn on these two layers. And you might remember that I asked you to position this one so it is nicely flush with the left front face, so it intersects. Let's move this one a little bit back and then we snap it just to this point. So what you see there is called a simple butt joint. All we can do is along this face, which I will select, we can apply wood glue and then we position it. Maybe on the left side we can drill a hole and screw or push the screws through, so we add a little bit of extra support. That's the most basic wood joinery you can do. It's okay for basic stuff, but it is not very strong. The problem is if we apply a little bit of pressure, for example on the right tip, chances are this thing can break off because we only have one face where we have wood glue put onto. So this is not really a good joinery that's strong. So the main reason is we only have one face, and the idea behind all these different joinery types you might come across is you want to try to maximize the amount of faces which also go into different directions ideally, so that you have more faces along many directions, all with wood glue glued together, so you have a stronger volume bond. So if forces are applied from one direction, you have other faces that help the joint to withstand the pressure. Okay, so before we get started, I would like to do the following. Select this front leg, Shift S, and then we say cursor to selected. Then Shift A, add a plane, go into edit mode, and then press Ctrl R, so R for making a loop cut. And you see when you go onto your mouse over this edge or this edge, you will see a magenta line. And this previews where we will do a cut. Don't move the mouse wheel because then you will do multiple cuts. We only need one cut. Then you can press the left mouse button and don't press again, because you see we can move this around. And to make sure that this is inserted right at the center of the square, press 0 and then press enter. Now we added a new line, so we sliced actually that face into two faces. And the main reason why I did this was, now with the left mouse button and shift we can select those outer points, press X and say delete vertices. Then we can select this one and maybe move it out a little bit. Okay, so now we have actually created a line right at the center of the leg, so we can use this as a reference and snap target for the midpoint. That's the main reason. Okay, so this one maybe we can also, you know what, we will move this one to this layer so we can always show it. Okay, good. So this was the prep. Now we have to create a clone for this leg. And the main reason again why I will not make a duplicate but a linked object is in case I will adjust the original mesh of my front leg, the clone will get the same adjustment. So duplicate linked. Okay, press escape so it doesn't move. And the joint type we will create is a half lap joint. So now we can move this one over to there and, for example, switch our snapping to edge and then move it over and snap to this part by holding Control. Perfect. Now you see this object is actually nicely positioned half in there. Perfect. Good. So let's give this a name. So this is, for example, front leg Boolean. Okay, good. For the moment, let's select this other leg here and we can press H to hide it. Okay, so we will take this object to cut its space out of this horizontal bar. So select this back leg, then we go to modifier, and then we go to add modifier Boolean. With Boolean we have three operations, difference, so we remove something or subtract, union, well it adds, or intersect, it will keep the intersecting volume. We want difference. And then here now we can say front leg Boolean, and this one, for example, I will actually move to a different layer. So and maybe down there, so it's gone. Let's take a look. Currently this is fine. There shouldn't be any problem, but there could be. So there is one problem that sometimes can happen, and let me go to this view and zoom in, and you see that the upper face of my Boolean object and the upper face of my horizontal bar have the same height, and that is a little bit problematic because that can sometimes in CAD programs produce a problem that when two faces occupy the same space, they don't really know what you want. So what we will do is we will move this just a notch up. So that's called overbuilding. So you make everything a tick bigger. Okay, good. And for example, yeah. So the next step, you see, there we have these parts cut out. We could, for example, go to this one, turn this one on. So here, then we make a new linked object, press escape, we don't move it, go to here, then we type in backrest, this will be backrest Boolean, okay. And I will simply move this one on the layer below. There's my Boolean object. There's, for example, my line. Here is my, this layer, the initial object. And now you have to, or you can decide, where do you want to show the joint? Should the joint for the vertical part be hidden? Then we have to move this to the inside. Do we want to see it? Then we have to move it to the outside. So it's up to you. I started here with this part being inside, so I will do the same. So I move this one in. Edge snapping is turned on. And then move it along the y-axis, hold the control key, release left mouse button, and we are good. So there we see now it intersects this area nicely. Then we can select this object, go back to the Boolean modifier. For example, we could either go new Boolean, or we can click copy. Obviously this one is wrong, we have to delete it. And then we can select this one. Let's only click layer 2 in my case, so we only see this object. So now mirror pretty much makes sense. Boolean makes sense as well, but Boolean what? So for example here we could say front leg, and here the Boolean we say backrest. So later when you have multiple modifiers, you start understanding what each one is doing. So I would say this one is nearly done. Okay, good. Now we can actually take a look at this one. And first we will go back to here, and also there we will make a linked copy. Press escape, and then we will, for this one, remove the modifiers since we don't need it, and then press M and select the layer below. See, I like to work, as you see, the bar and the Boolean, the backrest and the Boolean, the lag and the Boolean. So let's take a look first. So this part actually, the cut is on the right side. So for the lag, we have to make a cut on the other side. Okay, so this has to go to there. And then we can try to bring it back, and yikes, this happens. So you see it snaps, but unfortunately it snaps to the wrong direction. But it's not a big problem. Little trick, we will mirror this over. So this is our reference object. There's our world's object center point. Shift S cursor to the selected. So it perfectly snaps to there. Then we will turn on our 3D cursor. as the pivot point, and now we can select this one and say object and mirror along, Control M, then I can press Y, and you see then it mirrors over the 3D cursor position along the Y axis, and press return. Let's undo this. I could also press Control M, Y, done. But the way how Blender does the mirror command is actually, if you pay attention to here, the Y value is now in negative. So, sorry, for scale. And you see this one is updated, so this is correct, but this is not good. This basically means along Y, we turned the object inside out. So no, outside surface, inside surface, not good. We can simply remove the minus, press enter, and then we are good. Also pay attention to, for example, where the mirror, the y-axis faces to. There. Good. So let's select this one. Oh, sorry, first we should actually give this a name. So, proper naming. Select this plank, Boolean, and then difference this object, and woo, this happens. And that is pretty much because in this case here everything is lined up so that the software gets confused. And if I select this one and move it to there, nothing really happens. If I move the object then to there, well, it's back. See, now the surfaces there nicely intersect, so it can perfectly understand how you want to do the volume calculation. In our first situation, we had two faces that lined up too much, so the front face and the top face, and the command failed. As a precaution now, because we can bring this one over and we can bring this down, so there, let's bring this, oh, we have to do the snapping again, so because I moved everything a little bit there and there. Ah, okay, why doesn't it snap right now? Hold on 1 second, need to figure out why this happens. There, G in there. Huh, interesting. Okay. I don't know why this happens right now. That shouldn't really be a problem. It seems to ignore this object. Okay. Let's press, or I have to press simply some undos till I'm back. I must have set a setting that made this a little bit confused. Okay, so, but what I will do first is this one along the Y, for example. Here I will give a scale factor, so 0.1. Okay, so let's do the same. This is all set. Control M and Y, mirror it over. Let's take a look, and you see it still perfectly matches up. And now, for example, we could say a little bit forward, because we only have to cut the front face. And let's see if this, for example, does it already. And this is negative. We want this to be positive, and in this case it works. Okay, good. In case this would still not work, maybe either we can move this up a little bit so that the upper face is a tick upper, but that's not necessarily really ideal. So in this case, what I would do is I would make a copy of this object. Let's say I move this one to there, and then this one, This is now actually local. So here the x1 we can give a small scale value as well. So, and then the lower face I would like to snap to this copy I made. You see I just made a copy so I have something to do a reference to snap to, and then I can delete it again. Dang. There. Okay. So now you see when we take a look at those, they perfectly intersect. See? Not very difficult. So only what's left is the backrest. So for the backrest, we have to cut the piece out there. Let's see where this one is. Oh, that's actually the right position as well. So there, you Boolean difference, this one, and there it is. And let's see if the interlocking is correct. It is. Perfect. So there we have it, a nice half lap joint. No, not really, you see? Because I used one copy of this object and I adjusted the scale. This one, the hole is too big. Okay, so this is not really a problem. All I need to do is I go back to this object, Alt D, escape, and then I remove those modifiers. I don't need them. And for example, I will call this one Boolean 2. I might have to do the same adjustment here, there, and snap. Okay, yeah, it does. Snap across the mirror axis, Control M and Y there. Set this back to 1, so it's positive. And then we can move this one down. And then here, there we simply say, well, use this other Boolean there. Okay. So you see, doing the joinery is a little bit of work, which is why, for example, that is a final detail at the end of your design phase. This is not something you start building from the beginning, because it's time consuming. It takes time. It will actually then eat into your creative phase. And because it is more a functional finish detail, it doesn't really have anything necessarily to do with the proportion. It is also something we don't really have to implement at the beginning. We only need to be considerate about maybe what type of joinery we want to do, so we can create the correct lumber or layout so later we can build that joinery. Okay, good. So let's take a look what we have, and so far this looks pretty good. So now again, call to our best friend and save. Good. Everything so far we built, so it's nice and flat, and we could, for example, right now rotate it. So one of the main reasons why I built everything this way instead of having already an assembly that is built the way how the final product will be positioned on the ground is, in this case here, I only have to deal with up and down, horizontal orientations. This one is rotated, obviously, so it makes it a little bit easier. And now I can rotate everything. So for the rotation, what we can do is, there are two ways how we can do this. First, cursor to select, cursor to center. So it is at the center point. And you see that this center point Y, where the cursor is also where this object has its object center point. You might remember rotations, etc., when set to the bounding box, are all going around those object centers. Okay. If I now select everything and press R, you see everything rotates this way. So not very easy. And we want to have a way so we could always easily rotate it into a pose. And if maybe necessary, let's rotate everything back to this position. So what I will introduce you to now is the parent and child relationship. And we can actually make use of our empty. Where's the empty? Hold on. Where did I move it to? Ah, there it is. There's the empty. Okay, good. This one, this is a snapping tool. I maybe move to there. Okay, good. So how does child and parent work? Well, the idea is a child can be moved around like they do on the playground. But if the parent says, well, it's time to go home and eat lunch, then the child will follow wherever the parent goes to. So we will treat the empty as our parent, and all other objects, including also the objects which we use for the Boolean cuts, will be children to the empty. And in this case now I could show you also some more about the different selection ways in Blender. So you know, A can select, deselect everything. We know with the left mouse button we can click on an object. With Shift we can add something to the object list. Clicking an object makes it active. Clicking it then a second time, for example, deselects it. Okay, so then we also have B, and B is the more key selection. So with B, left middle mouse button, we add something to the selection. B, and then, no, did I say, sorry, B left, yep, and then B middle mouse button, we can remove. Left mouse button, B middle mouse button, remove. Okay. Also, we have, for example, a brush selection. So when we press C, with the mouse wheel, we can adjust the size by moving the mouse wheel forward and backwards. And then left mouse button adds to the selection. Pressing and holding the middle mouse button removes from the selection. Okay. So what I will do is, in this case, with A, select everything, and then hold the Shift key, click on the empty. So now this way I made the empty the active object. So everything that's orange is selected and the empty is active. So when I do the parenting command, everything that's orange will be children. So the shortcut is Control P, or we can go to Object and Parent and say Control P, Object, and then select Object, left mouse button, click, and then you see all these lines. So the nice thing is, if we now select the empty, we can't really move it right now, but in this case now we might actually for the moment do this for a second. So you see this can be moved. Okay, good. And we can lock this again, so now we can move it. But for example, we can say the y-axis. This one actually, please rotate. Now when I rotate the empty, also in 3D space, I can only rotate it along y. I don't even have to press the y-axis because everything else got locked. So now from a side view, I can rotate this one down till, for example, this maybe looks good. I want a little bit of a surface that touches there. Okay, perfect. Good. So how can we now refine the design? So we have posed it and we have to trim the bottom parts off. So what I will do now, on any layer of your choice, I will use actually, let's see, maybe this layer, Shift A plane, make sure the plane is XYZ 0, Then we can go into edit mode, select these 2 points, move them back, go maybe to this view, A, select everything, and then S and Y, and scale it. Okay, because we will use this plane like a cutting surface to chop everything here off, which we don't need. Okay, good. I will turn off the layers with those Boolean objects for the lumber parts, so I don't see this. So now we can select the back leg, modifier, Boolean, difference, and then select the face. The face also, let's give a name, floor trim Boolean. Perfect, and you see that actually it nicely cut this part off. Let's do the same there. Boolean, difference, cut this one off. Done. Now the back area looks pretty nice, but the front area, I'm not really sure if I'm that happy with it. Doesn't really look good. So let's say first we can and we have to do some modifications. So for example, there are 2 ways we can do this. In this stage, I can make sure that I only select the lower points. So A, deselect, and then with B, I can draw a selection and I move these points down, let's say till there. And then this is chopped off. For example, that's the easiest fix because I don't move any other object. And then if we take a look, this doesn't look too bad. This is nice and clean. I could go to here and A, deselect, B, select those, push this down. There will be a problem. There's a Boolean issue. That's because this surface, like a knife, think about the legs are cookie dough and you want to cut something out, you have to take a knife and cut completely through. So this plane perfectly cuts through the object, so that's a plausible operation. Here it is cutting into it, not through. That's not okay. So that's the reason why we have to extend it. So that obviously is also nice and flush, but no, this piece is extended. This is very thin. That's probably prone to break off. So to be honest, we can just move it in a little bit. Now we can use the grid, 1, 2, 3, 4 inches something. Maybe this is like 2 inches, 3 inches. No, this is good. No, this feels proportionally well refined. Okay, good. Nice. Then maybe this part here. This feels a little bit flimsy. It's not really sticking out well enough. Maybe let's see. How does it look when we do it this way? How does it look when we do it this way? Well, we cut this out, but that doesn't really make any sense. Okay, so see, like I'm playing a little bit with the ideas. Well, what about we just, instead of cutting it this way, we make it flush with it. Okay, so this is actually now maybe where the empty will come in super handy, because let's go to here. This empty we put in 20.4, so we can memorize this. Let's put in a 0. Okay. Shift A, another plane, move this plane maybe to there, and we can maybe play a little bit with the distance. This is not wide enough, so in edit mode, S and Y there, leave edit mode. And this one we have to make a a child to this empty. So click this plane, shift left mouse button, click the empty object, and then parent object. Good. Let's call this one maybe backrest bottom trim boolean. I'm German, we like lots of words. Literally, it doesn't matter what you put in there, develop your own naming methodology. So this really will help you a lot, again, later when you have a lot of objects, to quickly find the object you want to work with. Okay, so now we can select this one, go to Boolean, there, difference, and then we select this one. And this is on this layer, so this object I will put onto the layer below. Okay, good. Now here we can go back. What was it? 24, no? Wasn't it? Whoops, not 240. Or 20.4 was it? I think 20.4. Yeah, there. Okay. See, this feels a little bit more flush. Feels better. But I don't know if we really want to have this piece to stick through necessarily. Maybe it just should be at the end. Well, we have, for example, for the joinery, one face and a second face. We can apply glue. Both faces go a different direction. Here we have a third face. Plus we have the side faces. So 1, 2, 3, 4. It's pretty much, the small part might not necessarily really add that much support. So if visually this isn't necessarily very important, we can actually try to get rid of it. So we can show actually this empty, this layer with this cut plane. We're in local transformation. So in the side view, and then we can see if we can move this up. And H height. I see. The other part is missing. So what's happening there? So mirror boolean boolean. Let's see if we can fix it this way. We'll bring this one down. Ooh, then everything fails. Okay. And that's pretty much, again, these faces are too close. So what we will do is this one, just to tick, and there it is. You see a tick up there. Now there we have it. Okay. And then Alt H is to show the objects. Also under view, you have, for example, view all, view selected, all your different other views. There are some navigation stuff. There are also, for example, the Shift B or other selections as well. Okay, good. Under select, and everybody talked about this one. Here you have border select and circle select. Select everything, Control I, for example. Control I, select everything else. And then what else do we have here in the camera? And so much more, which I'll go into later step by step. Okay. At this point, I would say we're kind of ready. Hold on, what's going on here? What's this object? Oh, that's the Boolean part. Okay, and inside this one. In terms of having finished exploring the design and, for example, bringing everything over to Fusion, we at this point kind of like finished the explorative phase in Blender and are ready to send it over. But I will, instead of showing you how to get everything into Fusion now, I will show you that next class. I will show actually how we can prep everything first for the rendering. So for example, all these edges are super sharp. That's not very good. So we will add some edge rounding to soften it. So let's say we will start with this object here, and then we go to add modifier, and then we add the bevel modifier. Specifically with the bevel modifier, it's very important that the scale again is all set to 1. And let's go to bevel, and there it says width 3.9, the default. I think maybe 0.5 millimeters is a good value. We just want to break that edge. Under width we have segments, and with segments you see this looks like an even chamfer. And if we go with 2, if I zoom in a little bit more, you see now there's 2 subdivisions, 3, 4, I will go with 10. And then I want only sharp edges to be chamfered. So for example, in some parametric programs, this is now currently the normal fillet, and then this is kind of like the fillet that is ruled. Okay. And we also apply this bevel after the array, which means the array modifier, for example, takes the first, let me zoom out, takes the first object, and then this one, it creates this array. And this is now a new result. And this new result in the modifier stack, we will then round. We could also say, well, the first one, for example, round, and then this result array. This makes a little bit more sense because here now the software only has to bevel one object and then it makes duplicates. In this combination, it makes a duplicate and then each duplicate will be beveled. All those parts have the same amount, so we can click this one, and then shift click this one. So to select it, the third selected is the active, and then we go object and make linked modifier, so we copy those settings over. And whoops, I was wrong, actually this one has one less and this one has one less. Okay, easy fix. Perfect. Good. Let's hide this. And maybe let's go to this one. Also here we will add a bevel. And again to 0.5 millimeters. Maybe 10. And we can turn this one off, and then also here only angled. You see there are 2 lines on the face, and if I say none, even those get rounded. That's not what I want, just angled. Okay, so only the sharp object edges will be rounded. Let's go to the next one. Here we should not make this linked modifier because all these objects have different modifier stacks. So, but fortunately this is not too much to quickly enter. Ching ching. And there, another one, bevel 10. Can turn this off and angle there. Okay, so let's click, shift and click. Go to side view, zoom in a little bit. Yeah, and you see now all these objects, they have a nice edge actually. So this will look a little bit better. Really, now you can really see where all the individual joint elements are. Okay, and this basically concludes everything for this week. How to start the process designing this parts by, or this furniture piece, by creating the individual building blocks. And then we use an assembly style that's easy to work with. It's vertical and horizontal. And then we make use of the array and mirror modifier to automate the creation of certain objects. And then we do the preview of possible joineries via linked objects, and then the Boolean modifier, and then at the end with the child-parent relationship, we established a parent, so we can use the parent then to post the object, And as you saw, when we needed to do an adjustment, it was just much easier to quickly go back to the original assembly style where everything was vertical and horizontal, do the adjustment there, and then the parent we rotated back and we got back our previous rotation, and then we just finished the design with some extra feature like filleting the edges. Next week, as part 2, then I will show you how we can create the materials. So for example, instead of using scans of veneer or so and gluing that onto the different faces of our 3D objects, we will create a 3-dimensional wood material so that in the renderings our 3D objects really will look like milled out of lumber. Then I will show you also how we can quickly create a basic backdrop, add some lights, place a camera. You will see I use a lot from traditional studio photography to do digital renderings. And then as part 3, probably the week after that, we will take the design we did here in Blender and export it into Fusion. And Fusion has the ability to load the geometry which we created, minus actually the bevel command, we will deactivate it, and then take the mesh geometry and recreate actual NURBS geometry format. So you will see that in Fusion then we don't have to restart from scratch, but we can use Blender inside the design process or workflow I show you as ideation step, because we can quickly move objects around. We can't work necessarily very precise, but we're very fast and free to play with ideas. And then what we created, we bring over to Fusion, continue working with it, and then with the precision tools Fusion as a mature CAD application offers, we can finalize the design. And in addition, in Fusion, I will show you how we can create components, the building blocks of our design, similar to, for example, the linked objects in Fusion. And then also based on the components, we can create technical drawings. Fusion has actually, for this type of work, a very nice drawing module, which does a lot of technical drawings automatically for us. And that basically then will give you a good overview about what I, in today's time, would propose as a modern approach to utilize CAD as a creative problem solving and ideation exploration tool, instead of just only using CAD at the end when you did all the sketching, etc. Because I would use sketching, model making, and CAD all at the same time. But each program, each tool has certain advantages and disadvantages, and the goal or the beauty is basically to know all on an equal level, so you can nicely mix them in your toolbox.